Does it feel slow and frustrating trying to put a sentence together in German? Like you know what you want to say, but the moment you try to say it in German, you start overthinking. Can I say it like I would in English? Where does what go? And suddenly, even a simple sentence feels complicated. If that sounds familiar, you're not alone. This is one of the biggest struggles for English native speakers because English word order often sneaks into your German. So in this video, I'll show you the key German sentence structures beginners need to understand so you can finally start putting sentences together with more clarity and less overwhelm. And if you're new here, hello und herzlich willkommen. I'm Salome and I help English native speakers go from zero knowledge to confident and conversational German with a clear, structured, real-life focused approach. My goal is not to overwhelm you with more complicated grammar rules. My goal is to show you sentence patterns you can actually use in everyday life. And if you want to dive even deeper into this topic, comment Sentence Builder Guide below and we'll send you my free guide. It includes the most common verbs, useful time words, and sentence chunks you can simply plug into the patterns we'll cover today. All right, now let's start with the most important part of a German sentence. The verb. The verb is the anchor. The most important thing to understand about German sentence structure is this. In a normal German statement sentence, the verb goes on the second position. And when I say second position, I don't mean the second individual word. I mean the second building block of the sentence. A building block can be one word, or it can be a small chunk of words that belong together. I'll show you exactly what that means in a moment. But first, let's start very simple. On the most basic level, you only need two pieces to form a complete German sentence, a subject and a verb. The subject is the person or thing doing the action, and the verb is the action. Like for example, ich lese, I read, or ich arbeite, I work, ich lerne, I learn. That's already a full and complete sentence. Very simple, right? Now to sound a little more natural, we usually add an object. And the object is the person or thing affected by the action. For example, ich lese eine Geschichte. So the thing affected by the action is eine Geschichte, so a story. Another example, ich schreibe eine E-Mail. So here eine E-Mail is the object. Or ich lerne Deutsch. So this gives us one of the most useful patterns. Subject, verb, object. And at this stage, German and English look very similar, right? In English, you say, I read a story. In German, it's the same. Ich lese eine Geschichte. Or in English, you say, I write an email. In German, it's ich schreibe eine E-Mail. So here, direct translation often works. And that is why many beginners start thinking, okay, German word order is basically the same as in English. But that is also where the problem begins, because the moment you add more information like time, place, or how something happens, English word order starts to create problems. So now let's take a closer look at this. We'll add one of the most useful sentence pieces next, a time word. Time words are one of the easiest ways to make your German sentences more detailed, because now you can talk about what you do today, tomorrow, in the morning, or on the weekend. So some useful time words and time chunks are heute, morgen, jetzt, später, am Morgen, am Abend, am Wochenende. Now let's first use the most basic pattern where the subject stays at the beginning. For example, ich lerne heute Deutsch. Ich schreibe jetzt eine E-Mail. Ich arbeite morgen. So here the pattern is subject, verb, time, and the rest. But German also allows you to start with the time word. And this is where the direct translation from English starts to sound wrong. Let's take this sentence for example. Ich lerne heute Deutsch. Now we want to start with today. In English, you would say, today I learn German. So your English speaking brain naturally wants to keep that same structure and say, heute ich lerne Deutsch. But in German, that's not correct. The correct sentence is, heute lerne ich Deutsch. So today learn I German. Why? Because the verb still needs to be in the second position. So the first position is heute. The second position must be the verb, so it's lerne in this context, and the subject comes after the verb, which here is the word ich. So the sentence becomes heute lerne ich Deutsch. This is what we call a subject-verb inversion. Now, don't let the grammar term scare you. It simply means when the time chunk comes first, the subject moves behind the verb. That's it. So let's compare the two sentence structures we've learned directly. With the subject first, it's Ich lerne heute Deutsch. And with the time first, it's Heute lerne ich Deutsch. Another example with the subject first, Ich trinke jetzt Kaffee. And the time first, Jetzt trinke ich Kaffee. So notice the pattern here. The time word can move, the subject can move, but the verb stays in position too. That is the anchor. And this is one of the biggest differences between English and German sentence structure. In English, you can often put a time word at the beginning and keep the rest of the sentence the same. But in German, if the time word comes first, the verb comes next, and then it's the subject and then the rest of the sentence. Now at this point, you don't need to memorize a long list of grammar rules, you just need to remember this core pattern. Time chunk, verb, subject, and then rest. And this is exactly why I created the free sentence builder guide. It gives you useful verbs, time words, and sentence chunks so you can practice these patterns without starting from zero every time. So just comment sentence builder guide below and we'll send it to you. So now that we can add time, let's add another important piece, which is the place. Place chunks tell us where something happens. And this is where beginners often get confused because of prepositions. Prepositions are these small, teeny tiny words like at, in, to, on, and from. And the tricky part is they do not always translate one-to-one between English and German. For example, in English, you say at home and at the office, right? So both use at. But in German, we say zu Hause for at home and im Büro for at the office. So if you try to memorize at as zu, you'll get confused very quickly because at home is zu Hause, but at the office, as we said, is im Büro. That's why, as a beginner, I recommend learning place expressions as full chunks. Don't separate every little words, learn the whole expression as a unit. Here are a few examples. Zu Hause, im Büro, in der Stadt, im Supermarkt, am Bahnhof, ins Kino, nach Hause, nach Berlin. Now let's plug these into simple sentences. For example, ich lerne Deutsch zu Hause. Ich arbeite im Büro. Ich bin in der Stadt. Or ich gehe ins Kino. Now notice how you don't need to build everything word by word from scratch. You can take a lot of these useful chunks like zu Hause or ins Kino and then plug them into your sentences. Now let's combine time and place. Like for example here. Heute lerne ich Deutsch zu Hause. Or morgen arbeite ich im Büro. Am Wochenende gehe ich ins Kino. Again, notice the pattern here. When the time chunk comes first, the verb goes second, and the place goes all the way to the end of the sentence. Also heute lerne ich Deutsch zu Hause. Or morgen arbeite ich im Büro. Now, when you're adding more details to a German sentence, you want to follow this simple pattern: time, manner, and place. Or to put it in more practical terms, when is something happening? How or with whom is something happening? And where is something happening? Now let's look at a few examples where we combine all of these building blocks. Like here, for example. Ich gehe morgen mit meiner Freundin ins Kino. So morgen is the time, mit meiner Freundin is the manner, and ins Kino is the place. Let's do one more example. Ich esse heute mit meiner Familie zu Hause. So the breakdown of this is heute is the time, mit meiner Familie, so with my family, describes with whom you're doing this action, and zu Hause is the place. Ich esse heute mit meiner Familie zu Hause. Now, of course, you can also start the sentence with the time first, and then the same rule applies that we have learned earlier. The verb still goes on the second position. So for these examples, that would be heute esse ich mit meiner Familie zu Hause. So these are the two patterns that you can use when you're adding more information to a sentence. Pattern 1 is subject, verb, time, manner, and place. And then pattern 2 is the time first, then verb, subject, manner, and place. Now, a very important note on the word order. German word order can become even more flexible later. These are more advanced patterns, and there are some exceptions. There are situations where you can change the order for emphasis. But as a beginner, you do not need every possible variation. You need a reliable pattern that helps you speak. And this is why I always tell my students, don't try to build every sentence from zero. Use sentence frameworks, use chunks, use patterns. That's what makes German feel much more manageable, and you'll also progress much faster. Now, I know this may still feel like a lot in the beginning, and that's completely normal. Sentence structure is not something you master by hearing it once. It becomes easier when you see the same patterns again and again, and when you start recognizing them as building blocks. That's why I don't want you to memorize 100 different rules from this video. Just take away the core concept, which is that the verb always needs to be placed on the second position. German sentence structure is not complicated once you understand a few key patterns. Most beginner mistakes happen because English word order gets just copied directly into German. And if you want to practice this step by step, comment sentence builder guide below and I'll send you my free guide. It includes the most common verbs, useful time words, place chunks, and sentence patterns you can start using to build your own sentences without overthinking every word. Because sentence structure is not something you just understand once and then magically use perfectly. It's a skill that you build through repetition. And the more often you see these patterns, the faster your brain starts recognizing what sounds right. Now, German sentence structure only feels confusing when you try to build sentences through English first. If your brain is thinking, I want to say this in English, now how do I translate that into German? Then every sentence becomes slow, stressful, and overwhelming. But once you start using simple patterns like the ones we've talked about today, you're no longer translating word by word. You're training your brain to think in German sentence chunks. And that's exactly the next step. Because knowing the sentence pattern is one thing, and being able to use it in real conversations without translating every single word in your head is what makes German start to feel natural. So if you still feel like your German goes through this long mental process of German, English, meaning, then watch this video next where I'll show you how to stop translating in your head and start processing German faster. Das ist alles für heute. Vielen Dank fürs Zuschauen und bis zum nächsten Mal. Tschüss!